Dewey Finn, played by Jack Black, is the main character in the movie School of Rock, which is a nameless musician who goes under false pretenses, gets a job at an elementary school in place of a friend who is a licensed teacher. When he realizes how talented the students are, he tries to put them together in a rock band. The students, however, know nothing of rock music, and Dewey ends up teaching them the history of rock and roll during class instead of the usual curriculum. If one were to switch rock music with hip-hop, this school of hip-hop was what went on in the BTS dorm. RM created a playlist of artists, including Drake, Nas, the Notorious B.I.G., and Tupac Shakur for his fellow members who were less familiar with the genre. RM says, I made a list of about 50 acts whom we could listen to together. We did ciphers together to develop our rapping sensibilities and deliberately watched videos together. That RM took upon himself to be the Jack Black of the dorm was because BTS was mired in a uniquely terrible situation of the world of idol music. Big Hit Entertainment had debuted a girl group called Glam a year before BTS, with a docu-series of their formation shown about that time on SBS MTV, now known as SBS-M. Teaser trailers for their debut were also released on YouTube. But unfortunately, Glam never caught on in popularity, and Big Hit Entertainment was saddled with a sizable financial burden. When a small to medium-sized entertainment company fails an idol project, the consequences are more treacherous than anything that can be described in words. As Suga describes the mood back then, I thought the company was going to go over. But to RM, the biggest problem that they were facing is that their group, which was about to debut, didn't seem to know what direction they were supposed to go musically. RM says Bang Si-hook and I would have the members listen to artists like A$AP Rocky or Lil Wayne, but the members who joined later knew Big Hit as a company created by Bang Si-hook, who made 2PM and 88 and had worked at JYP Entertainment. But now they're being asked to do hip-hop and rap, which must have presented for them some confusion. The best RM could do was talk to the debut imminent group about hip-hop as much as possible. Right up until their debut, RM, Suga, and J-Hope's School of Hip-Hop was holding non-stop classes. Some nights they would come home after rehearsals ended at 11 p.m. and talk about music until 6 a.m. with no sleep. Thankfully, the students of the school were very diligent. V recalls, there was a time when RM, Suga, and J-Hope would sit us four vocalists down and very seriously say, I really think you should listen to the song, or let me teach this to you. RM put so much care into putting together the best songs in hip-hop history that I couldn't possibly say no to him. His care was so palpable that I felt like I absolutely had to listen to these songs a lot, even if I happened to dislike them. The classes were slowly paying off. Fee says, since then I've come to a point where I'm proud of saying I listened to music the most among all the members. Listening to all that hip-hop back then made me fall in love with it. I would ask the Hyungs to recommend more music, and I would find my own tracks to listen to as well. Vee's response had something to do with how the classes were taught. This is how Jimin remembers RM, Suga, and J-Hope's teaching. The Hyungs would say things like, isn't this the coolest? And show us all the gestures the artists would make themselves as they played us the songs. At first it was just fun and laughter, but there came a point where I saw it was really the coolest. I thought, this music these Hyungs are into, this is real music. Jimin adds, that's how we were indoctrinated into the hip-hop mindset. When asked about BTS's training process before they debut, J-Hope playfully lets out an exaggerated groan before elaborating. The alarm goes off at 10 a.m. We grab a salad, some bread, and chicken breast and go to the practice studio. Then we practice and review ourselves as we kept screaming, and start over again, and then it's, all again. And all of a sudden, it's 10 p.m. And then we go to the dorm and sleep ad nauseum. As previously mentioned, Big Hit Entertainment had more trainees than one would expect from a company their size. Any entertainment company just starting out with 30 trainees would inevitably need to prioritize resources. The practice studios were always crowded, and the trainees had to take turns with lessons. Jin says, when I got to rehearsals after school, there would be 4 studios and the boy trainees would be gathered in one studios. The other studios were being used to prepare Glam for their debut. But with the tepid reception of Glam by mainstream audiences, the company reallocated their resources to BTS. Except this time, the resources were being allocated under a greater financial strain. That's why, once the BTS members were confirmed to debut, Big Hit Entertainment was forced to release all the other trainees from their contracts. This is how the time and space to train the other 7 boys who would become BTS was procured. Their rehearsal times also increased significantly. If RM, Suga, and J-Hope were running a hip-hop school in the dorm after hours, the practice studios were a war zone of dance. It would be fair to say that the members had more trouble getting used to dancing than getting used to hip-hop. With hip-hop, the trio of RM, Suga, and J-Hope at least had similar sensibilities, and the younger members only had to follow the examples of the older ones. But the only members back then who were used to dancing were J-Hope and Jimin. RM and Suga hadn't even imagined they would have to learn dance. J-Hope explains, RM and Suga once told me they thought they were going to become a group like 1TYM and they wouldn't have to dance at all. 1TYM was a hip-hop group that included Teddy, who would also produce Big Bang, 21, and Blackpink. They became popular in the late 1990s and early 2000s during the rise of hip-hop in Korea, and it seems like RM and Suga assumed BTS would follow in their footsteps as a hip-hop group with mainstream appeal. Of course, 1TYM, like BTS, emphasized the role as vocalists as well as rappers and had some choreographed movement in their acts. But according to Jin, BTS reset their mandate to become an overperformance group. Of the muted training sessions at the time, Jin says, the proportion of our training taken up by dance actually wasn't that big in the beginning, but suddenly dance became important in our training time, for it went up a lot. We trained really hard, especially in the 2 months before our debut, and there were days where we'd be dancing for 12 hours. Anyone reading this book is sure to understand what overperformance means. Not long after their performances for their debut song, No More Dream, Jimin would execute a move where he would, with a boost from Jungkook, fly in the air, walk across the backs of the other members standing in line. But the acrobatics were not all that made the overperformance training so odorous. Jin adds, Bang Si-hyuk asked for a little too much back then. He would be watching playback of our performances on a PC and press spacebar to pause. Then he would critique every angle of our bodies and even our finger placements. He watched our dancing frame by frame. We danced the same choreography for 2 months. As Jin described, BTS practiced the choreography for No More Dream to the point that they were in sync right down to every single frame. 2AM, Glam, and the 4 years it took for Big Hit Entertainment to debut BTS was basically the company catching up to the past 20 years of the industry. It was an endeavor that required much research. The company analyzed the factors that made successful idol groups into hits and regularly consulted industry experts for their advice. Occasionally, Big Hit would post a reward for anyone in the company who could come up with the best proposal for the production of a successful artist. What Bang Si-hyuk learned in the process is that idols moved to a completely different beat compared to the music industry that came before. Idol music exploded onto the scene with the debut of So Taiji and The Boys back in 1992, and the 1996 debut of H.O.T., an industrialized production system was put in place. BTS debuted as the idol system approached the 20th year of its golden age. At first, teenage fans were now in their 30s, and the fandom culture had developed over the years. The content and standards that fans demanded also became clearer. Kalgunam, or razor-sharp group dancing, was such content. Fans wanted their favorite groups to create awe-inspiring moments of perfect synchronized dancing. Not only did it bring such profession to bring a visual joy to their fans, but it also served as proof of how hard the members had worked on their teamwork in order to achieve it. But to Bang Si-hyuk, who was part of Korea's first generation of hip-hop and R&B producing JYP Entertainment, Kalgoon was not something he was even considering. In hip hop, dancing was more about emphasizing the personalities of each performer, which led to less pressure for perfectly synchronized movements. But in the world of idol music, Kagum was the law of the land. And while there was an absolute need to follow this law, Jin remembers that even for idol singers, BTS had ended up in the overperformance category of artists. Sure, group dancing is essential for idols, but our dancing was more intense than usual. As their mandate for reconciling the genre differences between the hip hop and idol music became clearer, BTS was required to practice even harder. At night, there was the School of Hip Hop, convened by RM and Suga, who became students during the day at the School of Dance, along the others who were not used to dancing. J-Hope was the teacher in this latter school. He talks of those days. Jimin and I were the only members who had learned dance before we entered the company. I felt like the first thing we needed to do was help the other members find dancing fun. Outside of our regular training sessions, we occasionally practiced at dawn. It was kind of like the den of rap, where we would put on a beat and try freestyling. Rap had become fun for me during those sessions, and I wanted the same thing to happen with dance for the others. I would just put on music and go, now dance. Just dance the way you want. That kind of thing. Fortunately, the members were very diligent about their studies in this school. J-Hope continues, we came together a lot better in training than expected. When Suga became obsessed with dance, he would joke, I don't even want to rap anymore, let's dance. It's hard to believe, I bet, but he and I once went to Hongdae to learn breaking. But even J-Hope, who had opened his own ad hoc dance school in the practice studios, had become completely exhausted 6 months before their debut. He recalls, it was probably the beginning of January 2013. We were so tired when we should have been at our most motivated. There was a practice studio where they filmed our dance moves, and we practically lived in there, which is why we would stop talking when we entered there and became really prickly about things. In their quest to become an overperformance group, the members practiced their choreography and took lessons at the same time. In the midst of it all, they went on specific diets to be at their best possible physical states when on stage, at the point that they were obsessive about the amount of salt that they would put on their chicken breast before they ate it for protein. But suffering and worry had more to do with their mental than their physical states. To be affiliated with Big Hit Entertainment, which is not as well known as SM Entertainment, invited a kind of gaze J-Hope felt was overwhelming. When people kept asking us when we were debuting to a trainee, that question is like a knife to the heart. J-Hope was truly desperate. The fraught journey to his debut reads like a series of desperate moments. He recalls his life story after the move to Seoul. I didn't learn a lot at the Hagwon where I learned to dance because of tuition fees, and for the most part during lessons I would just sit on the Hagwon sofa. Because I loved dance so much, after the lessons I would keep practicing on my own in the practice studios. The Hyungs who taught me, especially this one dancer named Bangster, became kind of a teacher to me. He said to me, hey, do you want to come to our practice studio and dance with us? And that's how I joined the dance group Neutron. That's where I first came in contact with street dancing. Later, when I signed my contract with Big Hit Entertainment as a trainee, there was no place for me to practice. That's why, despite signing the contract, I stayed behind in the Gwangju Hangwon, where my dance training was outsourced to. That's when the A&R team contacted me, telling me it was time to come up to Seoul. J-Hope, RM, and Suga had to wait 2 years until their debut, and Big Hit Entertainment was barely scraping by the time due to Glam's failure. The practice spaces were so cramped that someone singing in one room could carry over to the trainees in the room 3 doors down. These circumstances, to the 7 boys who were about to debut, were a source of great anxiety. Suga especially had reasons to be anxious. He was preparing for his debut despite the aftershocks of a shoulder injury incurred from a traffic accident. He explains, I did all kinds of part-time jobs in 2012, right before our debut was set. My family needed money, so I would teach MIDI, work in a convenience store, and do deliveries. And it was on a delivery where I injured myself on my motorcycle. Suga's voice turns a shade quieter as he recounts the turmoil of those days. The company was in dire straits, and I was worrying my head off on whether to continue my life as a trainee. It was really hard for me, the act of living itself. I left home pining all my dreams on debuting. I managed to enter this company. I felt so desperate. Jimin had his own issues concerning his debut. I had given up a perfectly good life learning dance in high school to come up to Seoul, but no one cared. You could be eliminated after any of the tests they would put us through at the time, which was so scary. I was really putting the pedal to the metal then. As Big Hit Entertainment let go of their trainees to save the ones earmarked for BTS, Jimin became more and more anxious that the company could let go of him as well at any time. Unlike RM, Suga, and J-Hope, the vocalist position members, including Jimin, had no assurance that they would be allowed to debut in BTS. The lack of time for proper training and the obligation to train even harder after his debut was decided to put more pressure on Jimin. I wanted desperately to find the reason I was in the scene, that it wasn't only because I was forcing it or out of sheer luck, which is why I tried to make one more person like me, to show one more person how much better I was doing. Maybe I was a little impatient. Jimin's desperation at the time resulted in the following episode. A serious one at the time, but somewhat cute looking back. I didn't know how to dance like a member of an idol group. I'd never dealt like dancing like this until I became a trainee. So whenever the movements changed, I would pause and memorize the position. You know, like the Zolman character, the stick figure with the big head and sticks for bodies? I drew every single move in the position in that character and memorized them. It made everyone around me laugh. Meanwhile, Jungkook, who was still quite young, was in the process of learning about himself while experiencing dorm life for the first time and undergoing copious amounts of training. My personality completely changed. Being tossed into a place full of strangers made me very shy all of a sudden. I would try to avoid everyone's shower times while using the bathroom, and I'd sleep in the upper bunk of a bunk bed. But even if I sweated from the heat at night, I wouldn't go down from my bed in case I woke up a Hyung sleeping in the lower bunk. I realized then, I'm just very shy. His particular situation was the perfect storm of combined realities of K-pop, the upcoming debut of BTS, and Big Hit Entertainment's corporate situation. Korean idols usually debut in their late teens or at the latest their early 20s. Many of them begin as trainees in their mid-teens under contract with entertainment companies. Jungkook, who had debuted at the age of 15, was considered a younger case in terms of both entertaining in an entertainment company dorm and debuting as an idol. On top of his age, there was also the prospect of debuting with older boys like RM and Suga, who had already been active on the hip-hop scene and were obsessed with that genre of music. This meant at the same time, as he was training and worrying leading up to his debut, Jungkook had to discover what kind of person he was deep down. He says, to tell you how bad it is, you know once you reach middle school and you learn how to use the formal register with your upperclassmen? I didn't even know how to do that. Informal Korean felt natural to me, and I didn't pay much attention to the people around me. But when I entered the dorm and saw how it was coming off, that's when I started using formal Korean. How do I say this? I think I was lacking in my attitude towards other people, in understanding and deference and empathy. And then when I met the other members and thought, oh, I see, this is how you're supposed to act with others. Or, I should speak like this too. And learned how to express my feelings by seeing how it was done. To Jungkook, RM was especially the reason he decided to sign with Big Hit Entertainment. And J-Hope and Suga were his role models. Jungkook adds, the Hyungs were on a different level among the trainees, which made me think, wow, I want to be like them too. Or, the Hyungs are dressed so cool, and I would buy the same clothes. Back then, I think I was having these trivial thoughts more than worrying whether I was going to debut or not. On the other hand, the three Hyungs he looked up to were burning up with anxiety as their debut was pushed later and later. The day they would finally get to stand on stage seemed further away than ever, and the group seemed to be going in a direction they weren't expecting. Amid all this, they had to teach hip hop to the others in the dorm and set a tone for the younger members they were living with. In addition to this, RM, who had become the team leader, had the task of receiving from Byung Shi-hook the big picture about the group. RM remembers, "The company never pressured me into doing things, but they did remind me that the smallest things could create big risks and say things like, 'You have to do well as a leader,' or even, 'You have to wake up the members of your group.' This is where the worlds were colliding in dorms." To RM, Suga, and J-Hope, debuting was an immediate problem, where the 4 vocalists who were debuting faster than they anticipated were still grappling with what that meant to be put out in the world. Jin says, "I hadn't really understood what it meant to be an idol. If I had known beforehand, it would have gotten easier to get used to that reality. But once I debuted, I was just so busy and also so happy." Once their debut was set, Jin had to readjust to a training life that was very different than the one he had been used to until then. Jin and RM went as far to have a serious conversation about it at one point. Jin says, "The both of us were in agreement that the team had to go up. But the difference between us was that I was wondering if we could pursue our happiness a little first, and then think about what was going to happen, while he believed we had to give our all now for the sake of later happiness." While thinking a slightly different direction, V says as well that he thought differently than the 3 rapper Hyungs. "Most people train for years before debuting, so I hadn't even considered that my time would come only at a few months of training. I made sure I attended all the practices, but outside of practice times, I hung out with my school friends a lot." To V, debuting was still far away, and he wanted to experience being a teenager properly as well as working as trainee. But V's life abruptly changed once he heard the following from the company: "It's time for your debut. You're BTS now." The more you look back on BTS's preparation for their debut, the more surprising it is that none of them quit in the process. Despite being 7 boys from different hometowns with different values, musical tastes, and time spent in training, coming together to train in less than a year for their debut as a team. J-Hope had some candid thoughts surrounding this. "We didn't fuse together well at first. Our backgrounds were just so different, and we wanted different things. One would go, 'I want to become a musician,' and another would be like, 'I just like being on stage.' It was hard to calibrate our sense of objectives towards a single goal." But ironically, their debut as BTS being decided also became a decisive factor in their becoming together. V remembers, "While I argued a lot with Jimin, who is my age, and with the other members as well, we worked together so much and talked with each other so much that little by little, we really did feel like we were becoming a team." RM making his hip-hop playlist and J-Hope teaching dance were acts stemming from their desperation for their debut. Of how this goal affected them, J-Hope explains, "The moment it was decided that the 7 of us would debut as a group, that's when our concept as a group fell into place. We knew what we needed to do, what kind of dance and songs we would do, and we talked among ourselves a lot. I have this goal. What about you guys? Shall we do this together?" That kind of thing. Their cohesiveness went beyond sincere conversations, spilling over to every aspect of their lives. V says he became close to the other members through commonalities in their daily lives. "We all need to be on diets, but me and RM weren't very good at it. And being kind of a kindred spirit is serious business. RM and I would often go off to eat something nice together, or hide things to eat and secretly share them with each other." V's team building methods were also handy when it came to the younger members. "I would sneak outside the dorm with Jimin, and we'd eat together and talk together, or go to the Jimjimbang spa with Jungkook, or ride sleds when it snowed, and then pretend nothing had happened when the manager would check up on us at the door." Meanwhile, Jin got closer to V by looking for things they had in common. By the time V and later Jimin entered the company, all the trainees I had been close to had left, except for about 10 who thought to have potential. I thought it'd be too sad if more trainees left, which made me wonder a lot if I should make an effort to become closer. But V liked old manhwa and anime, just like me, so I'd go up to him and go, "Hey, have you seen this one?" And that's how we became friends. RM and Suga taught the members hip-hop, J-Hope taught dance, and Jin used whatever ingredients available in the dorm to cook up meals for everybody. In this process, the older members began to understand the young members, and the younger members learned from the older ones. Jimin speaks of the musical differences and encouragement he received from the other members. The Hyungs felt very raw to me. The way they were like, I just like listening to music was so unpretentiously. Suga is a bit stoic and would say things simply and firmly. And then he would also come up to me and say things like, I hope you work hard and do well. I could not like Hyungs, and that's how I became interested in music. Suga, on the other hand, was learning how to communicate with the world through his conversations with the other members. It was really hard to respect the fact that we were all different people. I used to be very extreme and trapped in a black and white mindset. My immature mind would think, why is he thinking that way? Shouldn't a normal human think that way? And eventually I went beyond thinking, that guy is different from me, to accepting this person is just being themselves. It did take a little bit of time. To answer the question of why none of the members of BTS quit during the time might be found in the words of some of the members. Jin sums up the situation back then. Adjusting seems to be the right words. Because once I entered the dorm, I realized, I guess this is how I should live from now on. Suga speaks of his pride as a musician. If it weren't for music, maybe I would have quit partway through, or if it had been some other company with a different culture. I released a lot of things in me making music. I don't know how I had so much confidence back then, making all those songs. A lot of them I get embarrassed about listening to them now, but the people who are obsessed with hip-hop, they have this attitude. I'm the best in the world, you know? And of course, we need to hear from the leader of the team. The members were just good people. Very good people. RM continues. The only thing I know how to do is music. I came into this company to make music, and because I believed my work was fundamentally to make music. And because I've been here the longest, I did have the most say in things. To be honest, this made it much easier for me as a leader. I received so much respect from the other members. It made me think that they are very good at recognizing and accepting each other. They really treated me well. And the long time it took for them to debut was well spent in training and building their trust in each other through much conversation and exchange. And so, the 7 members who had differed in every way began to transform into a team. Just in the lyrics of the song Pardon Gangsan, revealed 4 months after their debut, in the video taken in the very practice studio where they had sung and danced so ceaselessly. In the end, it's all Korean. Look above, it's the same sky we face. It could be a bit cringy, but we're the best. We understand each other, right?